Welcome to the Daily Agenda. So tonight we're going to cover Britain First, particularly as it's an en vogue issue. Yet again, it was a number of years ago when they were making a big noise before they were prosecuted. That is Paul Golding and Jayda Fransen. In fact, I appeared on a podcast recently with Jayda on the Mark Heath show. And this is not a recap of that at all. This is to explore the issue of whether Britain First is actually a nationalist political party or a centre-right political party. It began, I guess you could say, as a nationalist political party, in the words of Jim Dawson, to unbalance and unseat the BNP, given the fact that he'd had a disagreement with Nick Griffin and the criminals surrounding him, according to Jim Dawson, as many people seem to believe that Jim Dawson was one of the biggest criminals surrounding Nick Griffin, which is quite odd considering the fact that Dawson and Griffin now are best of buddies in their CMP pension plan operation. It's not a political party. The Britain First outfit, well, as I said last night, that was the mantra of the British National Party. I believe the National Front also used it. And obviously the British Union of Fascists under Oswald Mosley. So no originality there at all. Although I guess you could say the sentiment is broadly the same, isn't it? Or is it? So what is Golding? Well, Golding comes from a background of the British National Party, like I do. I met him in the British National Party. Well, I encountered him, shall we say. You know, he was in London and I was in Nottingham at the time. I found him to be quite a paranoid individual, but that wasn't unusual in organisations where they believe the security services are spying on them left, right and centre, which in some cases they are. And of course then there's the left-wing plants, and we covered this in the Rise and Fall of the British National Party docu-series. But I thought his behaviour over the Sophos antivirus security suite was a little bit over the top, quite frankly. That's what I thought of Golding, and didn't speak to him again after that. But you know, I wouldn't judge a man just based on his reaction to Sophos antivirus software, although it was quite over the top and quite bizarre. But yes, absolutely. I mean, other people have reported the same thing about Golding's behaviour. Jayda Fransen in particular, who knows him very well, of course, having been his abused partner. So this is not about domestic abuse, is it? Or is it about Britain First? Are the two inseparable? That's a valid point. In truth, Britain First began as an imitation game of the British National Party, mainly because of personal differences Golding and Dawson had with Griffin. And in Dawson's own words, he believed that the structure of Britain First should be both a political organisation and paramilitary, it having been built on the model of Protestant paramilitaries and marching bands, the Orange Loyalists, in Northern Ireland. And that's of course where the Christian fundamentalism comes from. I mean, just show someone in Britain First that, you know, that's the Elm of Or ring with Odin's ravens, and see how they react. That's true European culture. And see how they react, and eventually, once you've triggered them with that paganism, which is their true European culture, not Christianity, which is Jewish, of course. I've said that many times, and some of them openly admit it. Some of them adopt all manner of weird and wonderful fairy tales, like they're the 13th lost tribe of Israel. DNA tests just destroy it completely, so we didn't need to go on with that far too much, quite frankly. But yes, I mean, we're supposed to be nationalists. And this is the problem, isn't it? Is that these Christian fundamentalist nationalists, so-called, have a hissy fit, a massive meltdown, the vast majority of them, when dealing with pagans like me. So if I told them that this, for example, yeah, the Sun Cross, that's a Saxon, Anglo-Saxon Sun Cross from Kent, 7th century. And of course, the other pendant is, when I can find it, is Thor's hammer, also from Kingsfield in Kent, 7th century. So that's their true ancestry when they're talking about Anglo-Saxons. They were pagans, you see. They worshipped Woden and Thunor and Freya, and not this God, and not Jesus. That was a foreign import and imposition. And that's a very important point to make before we go further with this documentary, is that there was no conversion to Christianity in Europe. There was an imposition by force in exactly the same way as Islamic State operated in the Middle East. Read The Darkening Age. It's a very illuminating book. The vast majority of Christians don't like it. Obviously, they have a massive rant about it. But this is my whole point about Christian nationalism, is that it's not really inclusive, it's very exclusive. And I've encountered them also in the British Democrats, you know, quite a lot of them, in truth. And Jim Lethwaite's very similar to Golding's mentality, because they come from that BNP background of when Griffin turned it into a Christian nationalist grifting operation for his benefit, and Jim Dowson and Simon Darby and all the other crooks that destroyed it. So that's where we are with Britain First. It's a Christian fundamentalist organisation. Whilst I actually like Jayda Fransen, and I'm always prepared to talk to Jayda, and I appear on any podcast with her as well, in truth, I don't agree with a religious stance, and I'm sure she doesn't agree with mine, and that's just the way it is. And in truth, and I have to be honest with you, I cannot share a platform with Christian fundamentalists. I would be more concerned about being stabbed in the back by a Christian fundamentalist than I would someone on the opposite side. Yes, I know that probably sounds a little bit shocking for you, but it is the truth. That's my experience of dealing with them. And what I do is I press triggers. I know exactly what triggers to press when dealing with these Christian fundamentalists. Nick Tenconi, another one, is classic example. Nick the Greek, another nutcase. David Koresh II, you know, Fruit Loop, an absolute coward with it. In fact, he's demonstrated several times and caused a few thousand of his people to desert him, having had a flourish of support from the rancour and division within deep fake reform. And that's one thing about Farage, you know. No one can ever criticise Farage for this. He's never bought into the Christian fundamentalism mistake. That's one of the reasons why Farage has been so successfully promoted and pumped by the mainstream media, because they won't promote the Christian fundamentalism routine either. You know, Farage has always been very smart about that. I mean, there's also the fact that he's Freemason. But apparently in Freemason, you're allowed to have whatever background faith you want, as long as you're loyal to the organised criminal gang, Freemasonry. As one Odinist tried to tell me shortly before I expelled him from the Odinist order for being a Freemason. The rules are very clear in the Odinist order. No Freemasons are allowed. I will not tolerate them. And nor will they be appointed to any position of responsibility. So there you go. I'm not very tolerant, am I, where it comes to Freemasonry? There's a very specific reason for it. They're deeply anti-pagan. They're virulently anti-pagan, in truth. And of course, this Templars outfit, you know, the crossover, the overlap between Freemasonry and them is sickening, quite frankly. And I was talking to Kev Bryan recently, you know, the former leader of the National Front, and he told me that an Orangeman once said to him, I'd much rather stand by side with a black Orangeman than I would a white racist. Not an awful lot of difference between an Orangeman in that context and the far left, is there? Do you get what I'm saying? You know, that's civ-nattery for you. And civic nationalism, quite frankly, is just a leftist faction anyway. We've covered that issue in depth, extensively. And, you know, his branch in Coleraine in Northern Ireland was ordered by the Protestant paramilitaries to stop operating. But no one has ever ordered Britain First to stop operating. And there's probably a very good explanation for it. I mean, in Northern Ireland, that is. And Jayda Fransen's allowed to operate there. And so is Jim Dowson, obviously, because he moved there, you know, after he first went there as a boy, because he was Scottish. And Nick Griffin, of course, spends quite a bit of time there when he's not in his attic, pumping out balkanisation videos and accusing everybody of being an MI5 stooge operation. Oddly surprising for Griffin. And the only surprise is he's not got Simon Darby on his right flank doing the same shit. Because those two love pumping out shit about MI5 agents. They see them everywhere, apart from when they look in the mirror. And in the case of Simon Darby, he really should be looking in the mirror to find an MI5 agent, especially according to Kenny Smith. And that's a very important point, actually, because I've had a few long conversations with Kenny, and in one conversation, Kenny, referring to Dowson, and he detests Dowson and vice versa. Of course, Dowson, you must remember, eventually ended up working with Hope Not Hate, counter to the interests of nationalism. And now he's in the CMP with Griffin? My word. You see, none of these people have any principles worth talking about. Their Christian fundamentalism is just a rabid fanaticism, quite frankly, and it's all part of the grift. It's all part of the grift. They, you know, this is the problem with Griffin, is he thought years ago that by abandoning Odinism, he would become hugely successful politically by pushing Christian fundamentalism. It all went tits up, didn't it? Failed very badly. A fact which I told him it would at the time. But hey, don't listen to me. What do I know? I never get anything right, do I? Even though everything that I predict actually comes true. Everything I predicted about the British National Party in 2002 and how it would destroy itself came true. So anyway, whatever. I'm not here to blow my own trumpet, because if I was, you'd be able to hear it. But Kenny Smith said that Jim Dowson was, in his opinion, paying the paramilitaries for protection. And I said, well, that makes sense in terms of the stories he's hatched about being kidnapped by the paramilitaries and surviving interrogation. You see, in the British National Party, there were frequent links and contacts with the prods. Prods and cats is what we used to call them. So the prods, of course, apparently were on our side, and the cats, of course, were Fenians, the IRA and the INLA. And I detested them, quite frankly, and still do. I make no secret of the fact. And so yes, I was lucky in one sense, because at 18 years old I encountered Lieutenant Colonel Michael Dewar, who was the officer commanding in the Royal Green Jackets Light Infantry Division at Winchester in Hampshire. And during a Northern Ireland induction session, he gave us chapter and verse. It was a very long very long lecture, in actual fact. It was only about 2 hours, but it seemed longer. It was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. And I won't go into some of the details of what he actually showed us there, the photographs, etc. It's the photographs that civilians are not allowed to see. It's photographs of bombs and the damage they do to people. Photographs are available only to the military and the police. And yeah, bombs are horrible things. You know, so indiscriminate, terrible. I'll never forget some of the things that I actually saw there. And one of the things that he taught us was that the British Army intelligence, without mentioning anyone in specific, had touts, informers, grassers, snitches in the Protestant paramilitaries and also the Catholic cats, the prods, the Fenians paramilitaries. And so a few years later, when I was in the BNP, people were trying to form alliances with the prods and the paramilitaries there, particularly that clown Charlie Sargent, and he was warned as well where that was going, and it ended in disaster. In fact, he had to become an MI5 agent in an attempt to save his own skin, and that failed, didn't it? So I ended up getting lifed off for basically for conspiracy to murder. And you know, we'll best not go into that one again. Tragic what happened, but that's what money and power does to people like Charlie Sargent. They're just not born into it and they can't cope with it. And so yes, I had that very lucky experience, and I always used to say to my BNP colleagues, you know, being involved with the Protestant paramilitaries is a bad idea. They're riddled with snitches, and all the talk they used to come out with about forming active service units to do this, that, XYZ, etc. I used to say to them, well, the thing is, you know, if you're going to do something, you know, why would you tell anyone else what you're going to do? Because at the end of the day, these organisations are riddled with snitches. And that was always my understanding of it. And so in terms of Britain First and Dowson, and where Britain First was created, that it was actually born in Northern Ireland, a territory dominated by a religious, bitter, murderous religious division for century between the planters and the cats. And you know, religion, to me, I regard religion as being poison, quite frankly. I really do regard all religion as being asocial poison, highly destructive and toxic. I don't swallow any of this nonsense about religion of peace, whether it refers to Islam, Christianity or Judaism. It's all nonsense. Nonsense. The whole of human history contradicts that nonsense. And so that's where we are with Britain First. And whilst they can parade through Manchester at the weekend with between 3,500 and 5,000 activists estimated, the upper estimate is 5,000, the lower estimate is 3,500. Doesn't really matter. And each one of them seemed to be holding, you know, a flag of St. George or the Union flag. And it looked very impressive, didn't it? And this is what everybody said to me. You know, credit to them. It was great to see all those flags flying again. You know, England, Britain flourishing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing about Golding. You know, he's always been very good at optics, apart from when he went into the mosque invasions and parading around with Christian crosses and looking like the Ku Klux Klan without the hoods and the white robes, but behaving in pretty much exactly the same manner, and got prosecuted for it. And I saw that one coming, and Jayda Fransen as well. I saw that one coming. And this is an odd thing about Golding is, when he was released, I actually sent him a message. I've never had any rancour with him at all until this time. And even in the BNP, I just thought his reaction to the Sophos antivirus software was a bit over the top, quite frankly. But anyway, I simply said to him on Facebook Messenger, Paul, you know, why didn't you appeal conviction? And he blocked me almost immediately. And I was like, wow, that is astonishing. I mean, why would you block someone just because they asked you, why didn't you appeal conviction? So anyway, I took the view that there was something seriously wrong with Mr. Goldilocks, as I then took to calling him thereafter. And I'd obviously signed up to receive their daily email stream, and it is a stream as well. I'm not signed up to it now, I haven't been for years, but at one time you get between 6 and 7 emails a day. A friend of mine said he got the same, and every one of them was grifting. Grifting, 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 grifting. Money, 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 money. And it was always legal fees this, legal fees that, same scam that Tommy Robinson uses. And so I just took the view that Goldilocks, as I called him, was running a grifting operation, just like little Tom Tom. And little Tom Tom. It's odd because actually I have more respect for Tommy Robinson than I do for Paul Golding. You know, there's a little secret, isn't it? But that is true, yeah, absolutely. Because Golding is not my cup of tea at all. He really is a religious fundamentalist, especially when it suits him. And the way he treats women, well, that's another matter entirely. You know, but is he really a nationalist? I mean, I read this a few days ago on X. Oh, yes, Britain First and UKIP are the only two nationalist organisations in Britain. Really? My goodness. So that's where I formed the idea to make this particular podcast. So UKIP is not a nationalist organisation. It's never been one and never will be. It's a centre-left flag group led by a crackpot who can't decide whether he's centre of the road or left-wing, and rants against ethno-nationalism around the clock, just like little Robin Sob does, little Tom Tom, remember? But remember, I have more respect for little Tom Tom than I do Nick Tanconi and Paul Golding combined. And there's a very good reason for it, because I think Golding basically is a blowhard in many respects, and the way he behaved recently towards Kenny Smith accusing him of having a huge swastika tattooed on his chest and behaving just like some scumbag out of Hope Not Hate. I just thought to myself, this guy claims to be a nationalist. Why would a nationalist do any such thing to another nationalist? Now, of course, Kenny and Paul Golding, they developed a healthy dislike for each other, or unhealthy dislike for each other in the BNP as well. Same with Collett, you know, and he's always ranting about patriotic alternative and Collett and Laura Towler, and also, I mean, I don't like Laura Towler at all. I've made that perfectly clear. I think she's a horrible specimen, you know. But anyway, there you go. And I don't like Mark Collett either. I don't agree with the 15-year ban on him at all, but I don't like him. And I've made all the reasons perfectly clear why I don't like him. And I can't stand Laura Towler. But anyway, and we're not going to work together, are we? So forget all that nonsense about unity. And this is why there is no unity. And so Golding, yes, absolutely. He's always banging the drum against nationalists purely for nationalism. And so therefore we have to conclude that he's not actually a nationalist at all, is he? And then of course there's the fact that he's gone right off into the bed with Zionism, hasn't he? Friend of Israel. And also, you know, his dealings with the Russians, the way he's been wined and dined and, well, not wined, vodka'd and dined on Russian state television. In fact, there is no other television, type of television in Russia. It's all state television from the days of, of the Soviet Union. But, and then of course there's that chapter in Tommy by Nick Lowles, in which Lowles accuses Golding of having stashed lots of money, grifting money, in Russian bank accounts, and that he also gave Tommy Robinson expert advice on how he could do it. And so I've asked Lowles to explain that further. No response, obviously. I've also asked Golding about it. Blocked. Been blocked for years. Been blocked by Tommy for years, you know. Not very brave, are they, these people, you know. In fact, as I think I said the other night in a video, that actually 99% of these centre-right people have got me blocked. You know, the leadership echelon and the talking heads. I wonder why that is. Might it be because they're afraid of debate and don't really like free speech? That's my perception of it. Is there any other way to perceive it? Well, there you go. You don't like a question. I don't falsely accuse these people of anything. I'm not abusive in you know, the questions that I ask them. They're all completely reasonable. And so why would you block someone? Because you're afraid of the question and where it's leading. That's what it's all about. And in essence, I think I just gave the game away there, is that Paul Golding most definitely is not a nationalist. I struggle to believe he was ever a genuine nationalist in the British National Party, given the fact how quickly he stuck the knife in and ran off with Jim Dowson, who became his new daddy, his political mentor, then knifed him in the back as well. And obviously Dowson had to leave because it had become too militant, too radical. But isn't that what he wanted? He wanted paramilitary units, apparently. But yes, I mean, Golding is just totally and utterly self-obsessed, power crazy, egomaniac, loves money, doesn't particularly like treating women well, and loves lying. And so therefore, whilst he can put on a display in Manchester with apparently 5,000 flags, what has he actually achieved? In what way has the nation been changed? It says we're taking our country back. What, with 5,000 flags in Manchester? Okay, so they outnumber the Reds 20-1. Yes, it looked very impressive, didn't it? Optics. That's all it is, optics. But just remember, when it comes to Golding, he can also make spectacular faux pas with optics, can't he? Like the mosque invasions and his parading around with Christian crosses and harassing people. And that was genuine harassment as well, I might add. You know, we're not talking about writing a blog, imaginary harassment. You know, we're talking about physically targeting people. And to be honest with you, if somebody came, as a practicing pagan, if somebody came down my garden path with a Christian cross, particularly of that size, ranting and raving at me, I'd fucking knock them clean out. Truthfully, that's my opinion. I would. definitely. I will not tolerate that from anyone, I promise you. Never tolerate it. It's downright disrespectful, abusive and offensive and threatening. And Golding should have known far better, and so should Fransen as well. I'm pleased to see neither of them are doing it now, because they know perfectly well they'd be going back to prison if they did. But in truth, I think Jayda Fransen is misguided. She won't like that at all. And that's my opinion. In terms of a Christian fundamentalism, that's her choice. Just don't spout it in my direction. And Griffin and Dowson are both grifters, as I said before in the video about the CMP. Appalling, absolutely appalling history, both of them. And how Dowson loved to blame everything on Nick Griffin, and now suddenly the best of buddies, making videos left, right and centre, accusing everybody of being in MI5 safety valve operations. You know, honey traps. Well, there you go. We can only rely on their expertise, can't we, of such operations, given the fact of how they destroyed the British National Party from the top down so deliberately. Absolutely. Will Britain First do the same thing? Britain First will never be allowed to succeed at the ballot box. Don't be deluded. Britain First will never be allowed to succeed at the ballot box. And in all these years that Golding has had to put this movement into shape, he should by now have hundreds of councillors all over the country. But that is spectacular failure, and he's never been able to imitate the British National Party in that respect. And whilst 5,000 flags in Manchester might look impressive, it's still nowhere near what the BNP was at its height. And if the BNP had held a rally of that nature at that time, at its high water mark in 2009, you know, it could have put 30,000 people on the streets for a demonstration, but it had abandoned the policy of direct confrontation demonstrations. And of course, the National Front were holding demonstrations over 10,000 strong in the 1970s. So Golding, you know, let's put things into a proper perspective about Golding and the Manchester event. UKIP definitely is not a nationalist organisation. As I said, it's a centre-left flag group. It's just a totem, really, a legacy totem. And Ben Walker, you know, if he's got any sense, he'll get out of there as quickly as he can, and sell off all of those investments and do something different and better with his life, because UKIP is just a joke, especially under Tenconi, the worst leader they've ever had. And they've had some pretty bad ones, really bad ones. But Britain First, definitely not a nationalist organisation. It apes, it talks, it mimics nationalism. It's not nationalist. It's definitely high-end centre-right. It's nowhere near as centrist as Reform UK. There's no doubt about that. It's nowhere near as centre-left flag group as UKIP. It's definitely quite a few yards to the right of UKIP. But a nationalist organisation in the context of the British National Party, from whence Britain First came? No, definitely not. It's centre-right, without a doubt. Centre-right, most definitely. And it's staunchly centre-right. It's not drifting off to the centre-left. That's the only creditable thing about Golding and Britain First, is that they've drifted off into the centre-right and they've stayed there. And they don't appear to be going anywhere, left or right of that. And the reason why Golding has to rant so much about ethno-nationalists is because apparently he used to be one himself, didn't he? No, he wasn't. Let's be honest, he wasn't. He rants about them basically so as to differentiate himself from them. So he's not a nationalist, he's a centre-right grifter. Centre-right grifter. That's what Paul Golding is. And he's stuck in the centre-right, and happily he's not going off into the centre-left with Nick Tenconi and that sad little group of clowns called UKIP. You know? So that's the only positive thing about Britain First. Was it a spectacular display? I've seen National Front marches that were better in the 1970s, truly. Absolutely, I have. But yes, I mean, it was impressive and spectacular by modern standards, wasn't it? Because now, not in the 1970s and 80s and early 90s, but since then, certainly by the 2000s, you know, the Union flag the flag of St. George, it's almost become a criminal offence, an incitement to racial and religious hatred just to have one. And so to see thousands of them, yes, it can create the impression of a resurrection of the nation, but just remember what these people are, you know. Golding is now getting totally and utterly carried away again, and he's not sat on the sofa in his underpants eating cornflakes and pretending to be Adolf Hitler anymore, like Jayda Fransen said. No, he believes he's going to get millions. He said one day, you know, I'm going to be a millionaire, innit, Dale? Dave, whatever. And one day he's going to have millions on these marches. Well, that'd be very interesting to see, wouldn't it? Because he ever does get, if he even gets so much as 500,000, he could topple the entire regime, couldn't he? I mean, why would you assemble 500,000 nationalists, if that's what they claim to be, and just for a peaceful demonstration? Surely you'd want to topple the regime. What could their bent coppers do about it? You could flatten them, just sweep them off the streets. But I assure you that's not something Paul Golding will ever do, because he's a centre-right grifter playing the game. And I think, in honesty, Golding sold out years ago. That's my honest opinion. Britain First, I think it probably will have more demonstrations larger than this, but millions, I don't think so. I think they'd be lucky if they ever got 50,000 or 60,000, you know, 100,000 maximum on a demo, you know. We'll see, you know. I'm not the, how could I put it, the oracle, the prophet of the ages. I don't have a crystal ball that foresees everything in the future, and nor would I wish to have one, because humans are a dismal species enough as it is, without wishing to see everything else that comes in their future. But that's my honest opinion, you know. I'm very misanthropic in that way, you know. I'm not negative and defeatist, I'm a realist, I'm a pragmatist, absolutely, and that's where the misanthropy comes from. It's called experience of dealing with humanity. And so, millions on Britain First marches in the future. Well, if it's ever going to happen, they're going to have to get rid of Paul Goldilocks, probably Ashley Simon, and the diversity delusion that they've bought into, and actually write a proper remigration policy, because I actually looked at the website again today and I couldn't see any remigration policy. I saw an immigration policy which was actually very similar to the BNP's last immigration policy before Criven got the boot for being a crook, a grifter. And when I compared it to the remigration policy that I'd written on the dailyagenda.co.uk, I thought to myself, well, you know, why can't they write a remigration policy? Why is it none of these organisations can actually write a remigration policy? They can back remigration, they can use it as a buzz phrase, a soundbite, but there's never a specific detailed blueprint to go with it. Why is that? Might it be because that none of them are actually genuine and sincere about it? Well, I am genuine and sincere about it, and that's why I wrote a blueprint for it. I mean, I'd like to see what Goldilocks and his crew could come up with. And I'd like to see it, you know, within the next few days. I don't see any reason why he can't produce a detailed blueprint to explain Britain First remigration policy. It is, after all, according to Goldilocks, sorry, Paul Golding, I prefer Goldilocks actually, it suits him better, you know, her Goldilocks. According to her Goldilocks, you know, he's the man of the future and he's going to be leading millions. Well, let's see a detailed remigration blueprint to explain why millions of people should follow him. But as I said, I wouldn't be following him. Wouldn't follow him to the corner shop, quite frankly. Might get grifted.